National media reports that President-elect Donald Trump is considering an Oklahoma senator for a leadership post. The search for 1921 Tulsa race massacre victims continues, and the state superintendent forms an advisory committee to oversee anticipated federal education policy changes. We'll have details coming up on the KGOU AM NewsBrief for Tuesday, November 12th. I'm Nick Daniels. National media are reporting that President-elect Donald Trump is considering an Oklahoma senator for a leadership post for the U.S. Department of the Interior.
Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin is a Cherokee citizen, business owner, and rancher. He's the second Cherokee citizen elected to the Senate and the first tribal citizen to be a senator in nearly 20 years. He's often advocated for tribal sovereignty and hit the campaign trail for Trump, preaching the importance of energy independence for the country and tribal nations.
The reservations that we have are treated like national parks. You have drilling rigs and you have natural resources being pulled out of the ground right across the fence from reservations.
That's Mullin at a Trump event in North Carolina. He's also introduced legislation to improve Indian Health Service retention and recruitment of healthcare professionals. I'm Sarah Lisi.
If appointed, Mullin would be the second Native American to serve as a cabinet secretary. The first was current Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland. In a statement, a spokesperson for the senator did not deny interest, but said Trump and Mullin had not spoken about any cabinet positions. State Superintendent Ryan Walters is forming an advisory committee to oversee anticipated federal education policy changes from the incoming Trump administration. State Impact's Beth Wallace reports the move comes after sending a memo last week preparing schools for the potential elimination of the U.S. Department of Education.
Walters says the committee will be charged with identifying how to align state policy with a new federal agenda, including phasing out and replacing federal programs and proposing state legislation. While Walters searched across the country for other recent high-profile committees, like tapping the president of the Heritage Foundation for a Social Studies Review Committee and Libs of TikTok's Kaya Rychik for a Library Advisory Committee, he says the department is looking for education leaders and policymakers from across Oklahoma for this committee. He says the search has commenced for people who have championed parents' rights, school choice, minimizing government bureaucracy, and fought against, quote, social indoctrination. Members will be announced in the coming days. For State Impact, I'm Beth Wallace.
The city of Tulsa continues its search for remains of people murdered in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Archaeologists took soil samples at New Block Park last week to uncover differences in the ground. State archaeologist Carrie Stackelbeck says the anomalies in the soil tell a story.
When you go over like a larger area, presumably you're going to have a high degree of consistency. You're going to have, it's going to look very similar across a given area, unless you encounter something different.
When inconsistencies in the ground are discovered, archaeologists test or excavate the land, and that can lead to many different discoveries.
That can be anything from a buried building foundation to a trench to a burial, right? So there's a number of different things that can actually cause that and may not necessarily be what we're looking for.
The massacre was a white supremacist terrorist act that left as many as 300 dead in Tulsa's wealthy Black Wall Street community. Some bodies are still missing. And one of the two remaining survivors of the 1921 race massacre turned 110 years old over the weekend.
Leslie Benningfield Randall has become a super centenarian. Family, friends, and elected leaders gathered Sunday afternoon to celebrate. Fellow survivor Viola Fletcher was in attendance, as were Mayor-elect Monroe Nichols and U.S. Representative Al Green of Texas. The massacre Randall and Fletcher survived leveled the historic Black Wall Street, possibly killing hundreds. Green said back in September that he intends to file legislation that would give $10 million to each of the two remaining survivors, though no such bill has been introduced yet. In an interview, Green says he'd like his fellow House members to sign on.
I want all of them to sign on to this legislation, and hopefully through this legislation we can bring some justice to the two persons who are the actual survivors. Usually you don't have survivors.
Oklahoma Representative and Senator-elect Regina Goodwin presented Randall with a citation from the State House commemorating her 110th birthday. In Tulsa, I'm Ben Abrams.
You'll find more news at our website, kgou.org. We also invite you to follow the KGOU PM NewsBrief podcast.
No matter what happens in Washington, the NPR Politics Podcast is here for you. For the latest news, insights, and analysis from the election and beyond, listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.